I'm a nobleman in a vacant world.
Hello and welcome to the 44th Vacant World Show with me, Lumpin' Nobleman. It's a special one today. Well, it's always a special one, but it's extra special because we've got Angusraze with us today, who is going to perform at CONTRAPOP Festival down on Ramsgate Beach on the 21st of August. So delighted to have Angusraze here. We'll take it from here. So, Angusraze, thanks for coming through to Ramsgate. I appreciate it. It's a long way from Deal. Did you get the train through tonight?
Yeah, and the ticket machine was broken.
So you didn't pay
So
for it?
I didn't pay for the ticket.
Okay. Do you support the rail strikes, the train strikes?
Of course, yeah, that was my little bit of revolutionary action.
Good man. So, to introduce Angusraze, you come from Dewsbury in Yorkshire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Moved down to Deal a few years ago.
Yeah.
And you've been making the most radical music I've heard, I think, ever in my life. So I'm so
I thought you were going to say in Kent, because that probably isn't that hard.
No, well, people say to me, "Oh, I love your music festival. It's the best music festival in Ramsgate." And I say, "Okay, I appreciate that." But you're hoping that they say in Kent, in England, UK? No, in Ramsgate, that's fine. But I'm really excited that you're going to play CONTRAPOP, which is our festival down on the beach on the 21st of August.
Yeah.
And you're going to be performing your new album.
Yeah, like all songs. Well, I would say like 85% songs from the new album, and it's all like audio, like sort of, it's all like theatrically presented. So the whole sort of aesthetic of it and the performance, it's all sort of, there's a big like sort of circle around it as an expression of the album itself. So it would be the first like opportunity for people to experience the album, not just listening to it, but more so like the actual intention of it emotionally and stuff.
Okay. And am I right in saying that Touch My Side is the first single from the album?
No, it was a standalone single, but I think I sort of put it out because it was a song I made for this EP that I made earlier, and I sort of made it right at the end after I'd like released the EP, and it was just one of those songs where, well, I have a few songs where it's like you don't really think about wanting to make it, it just sort of like comes to you. It's like it's kind of cheesy, but Tori Amos puts it really well in a lot of her interviews. She describes like these sort of forces that give her songs called like the muses. So it's like this sort of power or this sort of being that just like hands you just a song that exists, like something might come into your head and then it's just like there and it just sort of like spews out of you. And that was just one of those songs, like everything just came just one after another, and it always happens at like 11 p.m. at night, and I'm just sat there at midnight, like I've just made an entire song in like 2 hours, and that was like that. And I thought it was a good song, and I thought it was a good representation of somewhat what to expect in the album, at least, because I feel like the sound is somewhat different to my earlier stuff, which I'll touch on eventually, but I think it's a very good sort of gradual segue sonically into that album, because I didn't want to sort of whiplash everybody into sort of like the new space of the next album.
All right, that's a great introduction. We'll have a listen to Touch My Side. was quite something. And I've had the luxury of hearing that before, but you still hear new elements every time you listen to it.
Yeah, and I was just saying, like, it's weird to hear it, like, in the speakers in this room, because I mix everything on, like, these, like, Sony headphones, and they're not all, like, studio headphones with, like, the big lead at the end, like a little phone lead that I put into the computer. So it's like, I felt lucky that the mixing is, like, very good, because the one thing that, because everything's self-taught, like, ever since I started doing stuff in, like, 2016, through necessity, because I couldn't really afford lessons or anything. And it's just, like, it's nice to know that I'm progressing every time I make a project, you know, and I feel like with this album and with this song in particular, it's the first example of, like, me feeling my conceptualization skill and my actual technical skill are at a level where I feel like I can very easily express something that's, like, in my head into, like, a tangible way that also sounds quite technically sound as well, but is also able to get across quite a raw expression as well.
Yeah, you were talking about this single being a sonic bridge between your previous work and maybe your future work. So what sonic territory are you navigating there?
Well, with the previous albums, they were all very electronic, and that was purely because that was with the software that I use, which is FL Studio. I was using a lot of, like, the default sounds because music was something that I've always listened to, and that was, like, the most accessible thing for me, like, at the time, like, because I could just sort of, like, pirate everything, which is what I did, because, like, I don't know anybody that's ever paid for, like, FL Studio if they're not already rich. But basically, like, I just self-taught myself everything on there, and FL Studio is mainly like a hip-hop, like an EDM-based sort of foundation for music on that software in particular, so that was what was most easily accessible, and that was a lot of the music that I was listening to at the time. And on, like, a ideological level, emotionally, the albums were, like, my previous two albums, which are Rosy Cheeks and Fox Mask, they were both very internal, like, introvert albums, and they were quite explosive, but more so, like, internally destructive, which it was somewhat intentional because, you know, in Rosy Cheeks I was going through a very self-destructive time, and I felt that was the only way I could possibly get out of it, was almost ridding myself of that weight. And, you know, and Fox Mask was, although it was more of a fictional, almost like Pink Floydian type thing, it still felt very internal and very sort of introverted. But with this album, I knew, after I'd made Fox Mask, I knew in my head that I had to make something that was more outwards and more extroverted and more explosive, but in an outward sense, and something that was very physically cathartic, but in a more collaborative and sort of communicative sense. So I started sort of looking to my friends for collaboration, and on a sonic level, I was listening to a lot of, like, noise rock, initially stuff by Zach Hill, who was the drummer in Hella and Death Grips, his solo album, and like really early White Stripes albums and things like that, and this Japanese noise rock band called Midori. And I just really resonated with it, and I thought with a lot of the genres, like hardcore punk and really old garage rock stuff, I felt it was quite similar to what I was doing, considering my upbringing in sort of a northern town, and like the inaccessibility to a lot of like modernized equipment and instrumentation. I felt it was, my mission was almost somewhat parallel to, I guess, the intention of people that were in those genres. So I felt I wanted to do something like that, especially because garage rock is just so fun as well. So yeah, I started working with my friend Jack, and they contributed quite a bit of guitar on the next album, which I directed, and it was definitely, there's a lot of organic instrumentation there with like real sounding drums and things like that, and I wanted something that sounded more physical and organic, and and I think at this point, when I think about what I've made now and the things in the past, it's definitely an attempt for me to almost like zigzag in terms of my discography, because I feel like that's something that I respect so many artists for doing, like, Tori Amos or PJ Harvey or Bjork or whatever. And I feel like that is something that I intend to do. Like, I expect my next album after this one will probably sound very different. But the one thread that continues through it all is definitely like an attempt to radically sort of self-express and try and almost deconstruct the performative aspect of my work through almost a pop structure. So there's like a constant friction, and I think this song is a good representation of that, purely because it's a pop structure but the instrumentation is just so frantic, I guess.
All right, yeah. So in terms of the self-expression, I've noticed that you seem quite comfortable, both in your music and in your general life. You're comfortable talking about quite difficult subjects, things that people shy away from. You talk about sex, you talk about death, you talk about people's bodies. I'm just wondering how that filters into your musical production, and how you build a relationship with your fan base, like what the relationship with your fan base is. Yeah,
I think with my music, as I said earlier, it's like that radical self-expression. I think the main tenet of that is just like honesty. I think all my work, even if it's like sort of satirical or self-aware in some aspects, it's always from a place of emotional honesty, or sort of, I mean, people have said to me, whether they're fans of my work or friends that are in the industry or whatever, they've always said to me that I'm like very real. And to me, I've never really considered trying to avoid being unreal, because my default, just in terms of creating my music, is just being honesty, and as well a sort of like radical attempt to, as I said, deconstruct myself from, like in terms of expression artistically, more obviously in a live sense, it's more so about just like detaching myself from the sort of a structure or an expectation of performance. It's, there's another Tori Amos quote, woo, and she says, I was watching an interview with her recently, and she was describing something to a group of like audience members, and she was saying, she was asking if they know the feeling of like, it's almost like your cells vibe, like just tearing apart all around your body. And I thought that was a good analogy for a lot of the things that are quite central to that question. So like when you were talking about the body and death and like sex and stuff, or whatever, I feel like that's all overlapping within the human experience. And I think when you do what I'm attempting, there's other bands that have done it, like Katie Jane Garside of Queen Adrena and Daisy Chainsaw. She does it very well. It's like when she's on stage and doing a performance, she almost just falls into that primal sort of stripping away all the civility and all the sort of social preservation, and just being like a manic sort of like cave woman, cave animal thing. And I feel like in that space, that all those sort of things, like sexuality and like aggression, and also incredible sort of like tenderness and things, they all exist quite primarily. And I think I'm very lucky in the sense that in relation to my fans, I don't have a massive fan base, but I feel like I'm so lucky in the sense that the fans that I do have, if they are clued in with what I'm doing, or if they are on that page and that it clicks with them, then it absolutely does click with them, and they're like completely on the same page. And I think in that respect, there's a very good relationship between me and fans of my work, because I think there's like a mutual observation. I think it's always very conversational. Nobody ever sort of goes, oh, when are you releasing new music, or release this song, or do this or do that. There's never really an expectation, because they all remain very open to expecting like the unexpected, or expecting sort of like my aim with that sort of radical expression. So I feel like I'm very lucky at this point in my career or whatever, where I'm still, relatively unknown. I think that's a very positive thing, and I think it's very validating, and it helps me bounce ideas off people in relations to communication as well.
Nice one. Yeah, just thinking about when you said you get into a sort of caveman primal form. When you go up on stage, so I saw you play in London last year, and you definitely entered that caveman phase, or that feeling. But can you describe how you get yourself into that? Because that's like switching between being present and being in another zone. So what's that process like?
Well, for me, I think there's a reason why I've only done 2 shows in my life so far, and this CONTRAPOP performance will be my 3rd. And I think that's because I could have done shows, and I could have gone out and done them as early as maybe 2017, but I wanted to wait until I knew that I could reach into that space, but also not like get lost into it, because it's very easy just to go like completely insane. And it's I think it's just like I would say it's about self-studying, but it isn't. I think it's more researching. I've consumed so much like art in my life, so much music and so much live performance, due to the internet. It's basically all studying. Like, I've just watched so many amazing artists who I love, and I don't just love them because they make great art. I love them because their expression of things like live performance are so sort of intriguing, or so confrontational, that it's almost very sort of like, it draws me in a lot. So then I become quite easily obsessed with things in that nature. So I just study it a lot, and I watch a lot of performances, and as I said earlier, it's like Tori Amos said, with every cell in your body is just like exploding at the same time. Like, it's just something that I do because I have to do it, rather than something that I necessarily choose. The one thing that I've managed to choose is switching it on and off, because I imagine it's sort of like, some of them can be pretentious, but I think it's probably similar to, when actors do all that sort of like method acting stuff, but like when they do it in a cool way, not like in a Jared Leto way, which is kind of like ugh. But when they do it in a way that's like, you can understand how it can be quite difficult. Like Björk, I guess, when she was in Dancer in the Dark, that was a pretty horrible experience for her, but part of that was her mentioning that she found it quite difficult to shake this character that she was playing in the film, that was just sort of assaulted constantly with trauma. And I think it's just about just in your personal life, just having a support system and having a safety net. I'm lucky enough to have a family unit that I can rely on, and I'm lucky enough to have friends and things, and I think knowing that means that when I'm doing like live shows and stuff, and that that sort of atmosphere is present, it means that when I bring myself back into civility and things, I can do it in a way that I feel entirely comfortable with, I think.
Nice one. That's
Thanks.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah,
And
hopefully.
yeah. So we've reached a point now where we're going to move on to listen to some of your new stuff, like stuff that's really fresh, stuff you've been working on in the last few days.
Yeah,
even.
yeah.
So these are demos from your new album,
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
you've been working up. So the first one we're going to listen to is an instrumental piece for a music video.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll go ahead and press play on that one.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And we'll talk about that afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
Was that a cowbell coming in there at some point? That was
It's
unexpected.
a wooden stick sound.
Got you. Yeah, I love the wooden stick sound.
Thanks.
I loved it all. It's great. I'm looking forward to hearing how that one. I mean, when you send me demos, I often think, well, that sounds like a track. It's like that could be a track. But then you've got more ideas to layer it up. But more specifically, that this is going to be for a video.
Yeah.
So you were saying earlier, off mic, that there's a fight scene in this video. So is this like something from The Matrix, something from Street Fighter 2? What's it all about?
It's well, the actual fight scene itself, it's inspired by this film called Funeral Parade of Roses, which I really love. It's a Japanese film from, I think, the 1960s or the very early 70s, and it's all about these, at the time, they were referred to as sort of like cross-dressers, although I think that's probably what they wanted to be referred to at the time, but either way, it's definitely seen as a LGBT sort of film in Japan, and it's very poetic and very sort of abstract. And in lockdown, I just watched like so many different films because, I couldn't do any music stuff, and I was on universal credit at the time because my income was like dead. So in that time, I just watched like a bunch of films and things, and there's a particular scene in that film where there's a sort of, well, I'd call it a fight scene, but it's a confrontation between two characters, and I just found it quite funny. It's similar to, there's those scenes in Clockwork Orange where there's like an assault happening or something, and it's all in like super fast motion with like a MIDI version of some sort of like classical song sped up like 10 times, and it sounds absolutely like ridiculous. But in that scene, they're confronting each other, and all these like people like peeking through this curtain at them, and they're like swearing at each other, but it's all in like complete stop motion. Like it turns into a collage, and then it doesn't. And in the music video, I wanted to make it so, like in my visual work, in every album cover that I do, there's a character called Susie that I made with my friend back in like 2016, because I was very insecure about appearing visually in my work, and since I've become more knowledgeable about the music industry and stuff, I think it's probably for the best that she exists, because then it eliminates the notion of uncomfortability of like feeling like I'm commodifying my own face to sell a record or to do press. So in this music video, which is part of a arcing storyline of all the albums and things, Susie the character is basically like hunting down this assassination target who is performing in this club. And you know, the biggest inspiration for that sort of part of the video is actually the Groove is in the Heart music video by Delight, where it's all like 70s inspired, and there's like lots of green screen and this sort of like crowd dancing around, and she basically hypnotizes the entire crowd to like start mosh pitting and being like violent and stuff. More starts happening, and Susie's like infiltrating the back corridors and, you know, assassinating these like guards. And the last part of the song, it's like a garage rock song, and the last part of the song is like this weird like sludge metal breakdown part, and that's when they get into like, that's when that bit comes in and they have that confrontation. And then she runs out and there's this big like gunfight with finger guns, because I can't afford model guns, but I thought it would be fun to do something like in Bugsy Malone, where they don't have real guns, they have like splurge guns. I thought I could use finger guns and it would be kind of like campy and funny, but it would also get like the narrative across that they are obviously shooting at each other.
Yeah, well, sometimes to take props away makes things more interesting.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the whole Dogma school of filmmaking.
That's one of the inspirations, yeah, definitely. I forgot to mention that. And even within music too, I think that's sort of a lot of the music I've made, especially in Foxmask, there's an interlude song where it's all like mellotron, like orchestral sounds in like this melody. And a lot of people would expect, like, if they were to put like a fake sounding trumpet or a fake sounding like violin in their demo, most people would expect, oh, they want to at least sort of make that into like a real thing. But quite often I like the textural sort of or contextual element of having that in the actual song. I think it serves a purpose, because, you know, it's like, if there's I guess there's an intention, you know, if it's a campy record or a campy song or whatever, why sort of deviate away from that trashiness?
Yeah, absolutely. So from trashiness to grunge, so the next track we're going to play here is your grunge style demo, which is one of my favourites.
Really?
It's like Kurt Cobain, Eat Your Heart Out.
Exactly. That was one of the inspirations.
Let's go. Quite a dramatic ending there.
Yeah.
Is that how the track will end eventually?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I think what I'm gonna do is, because I was just mentioning that it's sampled from like a really old video game soundtrack, and I did a bunch of editing to it. I'm kind of contradicting what I just said before this song, in the sense that I do actually want to go over it with like actual guitar and then add like melodies on top of it and stuff, and actually like make it a bit more organic. But I think it serves a stylistic element to it, and I think it was more of an attempt to try and create something that was melodic, because a lot of my previous songs are quite rhythmic and techno-y in the sense that they're quite repetitive, which helps, which is a good element to have. But you know, because this album, or what I've been working on for this album in a sense, is more it's more of a homage. It's more of a sort of it's a coherent record, but it's a varied record. But I think the important thing about it is like the musical thread or like the nuances through it. It's one of those ones where it's like I'm still thinking about what I can add, because I think I could potentially make it more sort of campy and more sort of like interesting. But yeah, I think it was more of an experiment in like melody, or experimenting more like the potential of me doing something that was stripped back and just like guitar and minimal sort of like electronic drums and stuff, you know, like kind of Daniel Johnston-y or something.
Yeah, well, I personally tend to like music that's reduced down, you know, it's sparse and there's space for it to breathe. Having said that, the stuff that you do that's full on and maximal and complex kind of blows my mind as well. So, yeah.
Somebody described it when I did that gig in London. Somebody said that it was like a car crash, like in a good way, like sort of like Andy Warhol, you know, people used to say that about him. I'm not comparing myself, please don't think that. But it's like people would say about his work that it was just so just assaulting, but it was like you couldn't look away. And I think it's just probably more so that I think because of the honesty, it's the honesty that get people continuing, because it's not like, oh, he's just doing it to like take the pee, or like, you know, he's just doing it because he's like having a laugh. I think people see the honesty behind it and sort of maybe the passion, or most likely like the need to do it for my own sake, and then that's what keeps them like, wow. Because I think, you know, a lot of people say, well, I got into music because of this, I got into music because of that. I mean, I got into music because it's like the only thing that I can truly do. It's the only thing like I have full passion in. If I didn't, I wouldn't ever really do it, like, because it's just such a horrifying industry.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you do get a lot of people that are they're using a lot of irony, and they'll touch on a lot of different genres, and they're not fully respectful, or they're not doing it from their heart, or they might think a certain genre, for example happy hardcore, they might disrespect that. They might say, oh, it's working class people, and I
love happy hardcore.
Yeah, so do I. But you get people that use genres, they don't fully engage with them, and they'll play a happy hardcore tune, and it's like a joke, and somehow I can always tell when people are on the wind up and when people are genuine. So
yeah, exactly.
So moving on to another genre, this is the metal style.
Oh, I love this
album demo.
This was my attempt at making, like, I was listening to Deftones a lot, and I just wanted something that was like, I'd made a lot of songs on the album already, and they were very like, they were very noise rocky, and all the album is sort of like noise rock, but the songs that I'd made prior are almost like quite organic sort of drums, and quite you know, you get like a guitar solo-y bit on one point, or it was just kind of like not traditional rock at all, but the fundamentals were there. So I wanted to do a song that was more like a banger, and that I made it with like live presentation in mind. You know, like, I think since I started doing shows, that's one thing that I try to aim for, is like when I'm making a song, like 1 or 2 songs on the album I'll probably dedicate to being, you know, in quotes, the live banger. And I usually do that with albums. I have a song where I'll be like, this is, you know, the single, because it's probably the most gratifying to listen to, and it's the most structural. You know, this is the compromiser single song. If I was on a label, that I could just be like, my music isn't too weird, because you can actually like release and market this one. And then this album is like the live song, where I want it to sort of like, I'm most excited to perform.
Alright, so metal style album demo.
Yeah.
The banger.
We protect this world. We protect it from you. You will never understand us as long as you... understand for as long as you kill. Susie is an imposter, a fragment of this new world, as are we, as are the people she wishes to kill. For she split in two. An atom, a split, a state. You bleed separate while you resolve it in coincidence. You will never understand for as long as you kill. Edit.
Oh, that was heavy, and it built up to quite a crescendo there.
Yeah, I sampled some Janet Jackson at the end.
I knew there were a few samples in there. I was fascinated by, well, what's the vocal that introduces the whole thing?
Oh, right, yeah. So I've used this website called 15.ai, and it's a website that's made by this university graduate. I can't remember what university it is, and the website is basically like 15 numerally. It's a 15.ai. And what he does is that he compiles a bunch of like voices from pop culture, so like celebrities or cartoon characters and or like video game characters, and he basically he's fitted this AI algorithm to listen to like hours and hours and hours of them speaking, and then putting them into a legible format where people will then type in a sentence they want them to say in text format, and then they sort of spit it back out. And the reason I put all these little sort of like speeches and weird things in is because it's the campiness and things. I was very inspired by a lot of like 80s and 90s like Saturday morning like Japanese shows. There's a particular name for the genre for them, but I've completely forgot. But it's like Power Rangers would be an example, or I'm trying to think. It's a typical thing where it's like you'll have really gaudy effects, and it's normally people wearing like masks in very colourful sort of like superhero type. It's like the Japanese equivalent to like a superhero TV show or something, you know, and it's often like cheaply made, and you know, I mean, I play a lot of like video games and I watch a lot of like anime, which probably isn't surprising to a lot of people that listen to my music, but it's like I just wanted an essence of that sort of like sort of like I guess like chirpy sort of campy, almost like childlike encroachment into the violence, because I think that's ultimately what camp is. It's like this rejection of formality, but it's almost like recognizing structures or preconceived expectations from the perspective of normalcy, and then just like completely just savaging them. And you know, and I think it's about mixing this idea of like violence and, you know, about killing and things like that, but within this context of like these ridiculously like cutesy sounding voices, which I thought would be like interesting. But it's like, I guess it's part of the overall sort of nuance of the body of work as it stands or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, nice one. That's great. Moving on to what will be, I think it's going to be the final track that you're making for this album, which is called Suck Blow. Do you want to introduce it in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I was completely comfortable and content with the idea of like, right now, of me being like, I've got the set of songs, at least in the instrumental forms, and the last element of the album is like done. So, you know, and well, I need to do the vocals for it, but with my creative process, I do the whole album instrumentally, and then I do the vocals. And sometimes I strip the instrumentals back just to make room for the vocals and things, but that's what my process has always been. I always write the lyrics and do them last. And this was literally from like 2 days ago from when this was recorded. What's the date today?
I don't know. The date today is the 2nd of August.
Yeah.
But it should be the 14th of August.
Yeah.
If you're listening.
So this is from the 1st of August, this song I made. And I think it was almost like as I was talking earlier about, you know, Tori Amos on the Muses like handed me another song. Like, I was just sat there and I was just working on stuff, and in my head I just got this like cheerleading rhythm, which was like da 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 da, and I could just imagine like, you know, like all the drums and the whistles, and I was just like, this is like it. I just started making it. I don't even know, like, it just sort of like, the song made itself via me, if that makes sense. And I just think it's like perfect, because very early in the process, when I was first conceptualizing the album at the end of the making of Foxmask, which is what I usually do, you know, I start conceptualizing the next album as I'm working on the current one, because, you know, I see every album as almost a response to the previous work. So with when I started conceptualizing it, as like a sports influenced album. And what I meant by that is that I was heavily inspired by like stadium songs and like pep rally songs, you know, like I don't really know many American ones. I guess it's like what is it, by Two Unlimited, that's You're Ready for This. No,
that's
that. Oh, it's the other one. It's the one that's on Space Jam. But it's those sort of songs where it's like, you can imagine a bunch of like Americans with like beer can hats on, just being like, woo. Yeah. It's one of those. I was inspired by that, and I feel like I made a really early concept demo for this album back when that was my main inspiration, and this almost feels like very cyclical, this instrumental, because it's almost me returning to the idea, but with the entire landscape of the album like built. So I'm looking at it from a completely different perspective, but I've still managed to sort of like impact sort of that landscape in the exact same nuance, but with completely, well, almost like a full intention. So yeah.
All right, here we go with Suck Blow.
Ready, let's go! Let's fucking go!
that one, that was pretty banging as well. You know,
Isn't it?
we played a banging one earlier, but that was just as banging, if not more so. And for me, it brought to mind like early 80s electro and the early and Detroit techno. People like Juan Atkins and Eddie Flashin' Folks and people like this. You were talking about you used some rave samples in there, so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Just, you know, thinking about all the tunes we've heard today, you've gone through various genres, and we touched on it earlier about artists using different genres and whether they engage fully with them. Just a question about genre, wondering how you feel about, do you think that it's okay for artists to plunder different genres and not really engage them and just take what they like, or do you think artists should engage fully and respect a genre and, you know, base their art on the legacy of that genre?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it's definitely something that I believe is like present within the world of like music fans. I feel like a lot of pop music that I've heard on the radio, I feel like sampling, well, not just sampling, but more so interpolation of previous sort of like hits is quite popular now. You're getting a lot of like sampling of like 80s songs that are already quite recognisable and 90s sort of like dance songs. And I feel like I feel like to me music and all art is conversational. You know, it's every piece of art cannot exist without a previous piece of art existing to influence it or to bounce off of it. And I think depending on where you're from, I think that's how scenes are created, or music communities, like, you know, a lot of techno and a lot of that really old stuff from Detroit. I feel like you know, it's genres basically created by and I guess built upon by the black community, and I think that's because the conversational aspect of the music it created, it manifested within the conversational I guess solidarity of those groups of people. And I feel like with me coming from a northern background, a lot of dance and rave music in the north of England, especially in Yorkshire and West Yorkshire, is really a communal and community thing. I was talking actually to my friend Julian from Show Me the Body, which are a punk band from New York City, and I was talking to him because he described hardcore punk music as the folk music of New York City specifically, and I think I really understand that, you know, in relation to dance music and as you were saying earlier about like happy hardcore music and like bassline and MC music and rhythm music and stuff. I feel like a lot of that is almost like the folk music of the North, purely because if you compare it to a lot more of like the slicker, more minimal, spacier genres of dance music from maybe places like Brighton or areas of London and things, apart from where grime exists and things like that. But I think there's definitely a difference. I think a lot of northern music does have more of like, not a grit, but there's a bit more of like a directness with it, and I think musically that's where the honesty comes from. I don't know anything else but to be honest, because that's all the people there have. All they have is just like their family and their stories and their like legacy, and that's why there's so many stories shared, because really like everything else has just been sort of like taken from them, which sounds horrible and it makes me like somewhat emotional, but it's true like.
Well, I can't wait to see your set at CONTRAPOP.
Thanks, I can.
I'm just delighted that you've agreed to come down and play.
Oh, thanks. I can't believe you even asked me. It was insane. I was like, you asked me.
And you're bringing two musicians with you.
Oh,
You've
yes,
got a guitarist and someone
from
else.
Trash Mammoth. That's William. Oh my God, Burroughs. I forgot his last name. I'm so sorry, Will. And Jack. Do you know his last name? You told him.
That's Jack Norton.
Yes, hello. Oh my God, they're gonna hate me for that. Hi. And then I asked them to help me because with my previous live shows, it had just been like beats, which were done with the help of Will Materialise. And I felt with this album, I wanted to add. I was inspired quite a bit by Melt Banana, who are a very good live band. And I like the idea of them having this almost destructive element to their live set. You know, I wanted to represent it almost as in the album exists as like a consumable like body of work from beginning to end, you know, to be listened to throughout as a conceptual piece. And then the live shows, I wanted to almost take that and just like sort of ravage it and sort of like mess it up, and well, not mess it up, but I mean sort of like almost smash against it, more so for my own curiosity rather than an intention. And I feel like they have enough sense of humour about what they do and a self-awareness that maybe I'm too overly serious about my art to have. And I feel like when I first saw them, which was at the Lighthouse in Deal when they performed as Trash Mammoth, it was the best thing I'd ever seen, purely because all that time before, when I'd go to see a live show, I'd always expected to be entertained or to be gratified as an audience member. But they turned up and like messed with the audience the entire time. You know, and it smashed my expectations of what a live show could be, and I was really inspired by it, and I still am. I still love them both very much, and I think that I wanted them aboard because I think they could add that humorous self-awareness to it. And I think William is a great guitarist as well, because he has that similar mindset of he is entirely capable of playing like traditional melodic guitar. Like, he's incredibly talented as a guitar player, but I wanted to give him an opportunity to be able to deconstruct that for himself. And with Jack too, even though Trash Mammoth, although it might seem very improvisational, I'm sure there's an ideological or a structural intention within what they're doing. But I wanted to give them a space to be able to do that, because I feel it would amplify my attempt at that, you know, physically. And there's elements in the guitar playing where it goes, you know, as I said, as I'm shifting my paradigm physically from a sort of very tight masculine movement to a more sort of floppy, like sort of writhing one, he will sort of phase in and out of a more traditional melodic accompaniment sort of guitar work alongside the melodies in the music, but then in some areas of some songs he'll just dip into sort of like destructive, incomprehensible sort of like noise. He has this like entire effects setup, which is actually a DJ effects sort of box, and he uses it on his guitar, so he's got like all these crazy reverb stuff and like distortion and stuttering and everything. So I like the idea of it being on this like this cliff edge. I think that's quite representative of, you know, as I said, the intention with my actual physical performance, and I think it'll match the intention of the record as well with, you know, the aspects of the songs that are more structural, and then you have the bits where it falls into like pure sort of like heavy beat sort of like drops and things like that. I think it'll complement that, you know. Yeah, well, it's been great having you, Angusraze. Thank you.
And really can't wait for your set, which is on Sunday the 21st of August down on Ramsgate Beach for CONTRAPOP Festival.
What time again?
We haven't announced the times yet.
Ooh.
So but you're likely to play. Well, you know when you're playing.
I know,
But-
I was
but-
teasing.
You're likely to play halfway through the afternoon. So, yeah, but just to also wrap up by saying the festival starts on the Saturday, so 12 noon or midday on the Saturday up until 11 on the Saturday night, and then we've got
11, wow.
we've got our license for 11 o'clock.
Oh, nice.
So that's good.
Did you have that last year?
Yeah, we did actually.
Oh, nice.
And we'll do the same on the Sunday, and we'll see you on the Sunday.
Hey.
So thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.